know that we are here today in the house of God, in this holy place, in this spiritual home, to take our spiritual substance. We know that God, Spirit, is everywhere present and is with us here as we get our spiritual sustenance, for sure. I know that in this unity, because God is in us and we are in God, that each one of us will hear what we need to hear and take that information and use it wherever and whenever we need it. I know that the love, the harmony, the peace that's in each one of us just exudes today and from now on. I bless the congregation. I bless the speakers that come forth to let us know what's happening in the church today. I bless M-Wave to make sure that our service runs smooth and with ease. And I bless Reverend Neil, not Reverend yet, Reverend to be Neil, as he gives the message. He's the vessel of Spirit, and his message today will be sharing the dream. I know that God is with us, each one of us. I know that we are blessed, and so it is.
At Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, we believe in spiritual living. Above all else, it is a philosophy that teaches us how to think and not what to think. We invite everyone to practice this philosophy by living in principle. We believe that God is all there is, and each person's relationship to God is a personal one. Every person, place, and thing, and all the space in between is not only an expression of God, but God itself. All love, peace, and beauty that is God exists within each person right now. Together we are all connected as one. Our faith allows us to apply this philosophy to our lives in every moment of every day. As we live in love, we see love revealed and flowing through the world around us. We act as citizens of this spiritual community at all times. This is how we think. We believe in God, we believe in ourselves, and we believe in you because we believe in spiritual living. We are the Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont.
Hey, good morning again. I am happy to be with you again this morning. We are continuing our yearly theme, which is Timeless Wisdom, Evolutionary Vision. And I would just like to thank Evonne for the free promotion I got this morning. It'll save me some money at ministerial school. This month, we're talking about spiritual community. Our theme is going farther together, and it's based on an African proverb that reminds us that alone we can go faster, together we can go farther. And I think sometimes in our science of mind teaching, which is the name of our faith and philosophy here, it really focuses on our individual responsibility and our individual consciousness. And sometimes I think we forget that it's not a by myself or with others, but it's a but and, right? It's an and. Yes, we are individual expressions of consciousness. Yes, we are individually responsible for our consciousness, but we're also on this spiritual journey together. So that African proverb, alone we can go faster, together we can go farther, we can go deeper. Going together implies that we have a common goal, a common mission, a common destination, a common set of shared values. Last week, we talked about this idea of the 80-20 rule and going deeper together and committing to spiritual community, jumping into that hole. And we also talked about these 4 really core beliefs of our spiritual teaching. The oneness of all life, healing any sense of separation between the divine and us, and recognizing that no healing is needed, and the spiritual practices to help us recognize that. Can you imagine a world that operated from these four principles on a consistent basis? If you've ever been to a large gathering for Center for Spiritual Living or a retreat, you know that this is something palpable. You get a room full of 100, 200 people that are all on the same page with you spiritually, that all have these shared values. Last week we talked about this idea of the emergent quality. This idea that wherever two or more are gathered, there I am, the great I am, God. It is that third thing that emerges from any group of people. It is a group consciousness. And I have had some interesting experiences with this because I came into this teaching through the avenue of teen camp, which some of you have heard me say before. So the idea being, the story goes that I didn't know anything about the science of mind. And I met a minister online. And long story short, we became friends, and she was telling me about the teaching. And I had just graduated from EMT school. And she said, "Hey, will you come and be the camp nurse at our teen camp?" And I was like, "Cool, I'm going to get paid." Because that was the important part, right? And so I went and I spent a week with these crazy religious scientists who were all about love and peace and order. And it was amazing to be in the company of 100 people who all believed in these values. I could feel the spiritual connection. I could feel those values. So I always like to say I went to camp and I never left. And I've been here ever since. So to me, that is the dream. My talk today is sharing the dream. To me, that is the dream. A world that works from our shared values of oneness, healing, and spiritual practice. So how do we get there? How do we share the dream of a world that operates from the values of oneness, healing, and spiritual practice? We have to walk our talk. That means we identify our values and we live from them, not only in theory, but in practice. I was reading Ernest Holmes the other day, and he was quoting Emerson. And Emerson said, "We have a tendency to engage in too much theory and not enough practice." And I think that on many levels, for me even, that so describes our spiritual life. We think we know, like, oh, I know science of mind. We know the principles. We know the theories behind them. But knowing's not enough. We have to practice them. We have to walk our talk. Not only individually, but collectively as a community. Ralph Waldo Emerson also said, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." The idea behind that quote being that we can say all we believe in oneness, all we want. We can say that we believe in this thing called spiritual living. We can say we believe in love and the transformational power of our teaching. But if we're not walking our talk, people hear who we are, both individually and as a community. In her book, Dare to Lead, Brene Brown calls this living into our values. She says, "A value is a way of being or believing that we hold most important." She goes on to say, "We must be clear about what we believe and hold important. And we take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with these beliefs." Our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with this belief? While this is of course true on an individual scale, our focus this month has been on this idea of spiritual community. So I'm going to talk to you about that on that level. What are the values of this spiritual community? What are the things that you hold most important? I want you to hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to that. Brene Brown goes on to say that the first step of living into our values is noticing what is most important to us. As you continue on your journey to partner with a new community spiritual leader, it is important that the community be able to identify your values and make sure that they are in alignment with your next community spiritual leader. Brene Brown writes that you live into these values. I'm sorry, let me back up. She says that you can't live into these values that you can't name. If you're going to live into the values, your spiritual values, you have to be able to name them. You can't share your values out into the world. You can't share this dream of oneness and spiritual living if you can't even articulate what the value is that you're holding. We have to be able to walk our talk. And we have to identify those values that are important to us both on an individual level and on a community level. So what values as a spiritual community do you hold sacred? I passed out, some of you got, I think all of you got, this list of values. This comes from Brene Brown. And of course, this list is not extensive or exhaustive. But I'm going to invite you to take a minute and just sort of scan that list. And I'm going to invite you, it doesn't have to be on this list. I'm going to invite you to share out some values that you think as a spiritual community, Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont is about. What are the shared values? If you're online, I'm going to invite you to type them into the chat, and Adrian will share them for us. But what do you think are the shared values of this community? What are we about? Go ahead and tell me something. Authenticity. Welcoming. Loyalty. Serenity. Connection. Love. Peacefulness. Collaboration. Integrity. What was that? Family. Openness. Well-being. Wisdom.
From online, love and peace.
Love and peace. Wisdom, I think I heard.
Welcoming.
Loyalty. Openness. So the idea behind this list and these ideas is that if we're going to walk our talk, if we're going to share the dream of our spiritual community out into the world, we first have to identify the values that we hold dear as a spiritual community. So the second step of living our values is aligning our behavior with our values. We just heard a lot of values. I heard loyalty and openness and love and wisdom. Does our behavior, do our actions align with our values? When you talk to anybody in this community, do you talk with love, compassion, wisdom? Are you welcoming to every single person who walks in this door? Do we have openness, both to new people and to new ideas? You just told me those are our values as a community. But the second part of that question is, does our behavior align with those values? Do we live welcoming, love, peace, wisdom? Do we live that with each other? Do you, as a community, hold yourselves accountable to those values? Do you hold your service leaders and your leaders accountable for those values? Are all the decisions, actions, events, and programs that happen at Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, are they in alignment with those values? I invite you to take this home, and you can also do this on an individual level, is identifying the 2 or 3, no more than that, the 2 or 3 values that drive your life. What is 2 or 3 most important ideas or values that you share, that drive your life, that help you make those decisions? And then ask yourself, do my behaviors, do my actions align with those values? And if they don't, the invitation is to look at that. So the Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont has a set of values that as a group that you all hold most important. But the Centers for Spiritual Living also has a statement of values as an organization. Perhaps the spiritual community shares all or some of them. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called the Global Heart Vision. This is our dream as an organization, as the Center for Spiritual Living, that we want to share with the world. And sometimes thinking globally is just too big, too abstract. So rather than focusing on all the whole globe, and because we're talking about spiritual community this month, and because you are embarking on this journey of finding a new community spiritual leader, we're going to look at those value statements from the point of view of this community. So as we go through these, I want you to think these questions. Number 1, are we, as CSL Beaumont, living these values with each other consistently, consciously, constantly? Do we hold each other accountable for living into these values? Are we walking our talk? And lastly, are we taking actions that are in alignment with these values? 3 things I want you to think about. Are you living these values with each other as a community? Do you hold each other accountable for these values? Are we walking our talk? And are we taking actions that are in alignment with these values? So Adrian's going to put up on the screen the statements from this Global Heart Vision. And in the parentheses, you'll notice that I changed it to be just about Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont. So I'm going to go through these, and I just want you to, in the solitude of your own mind, reflect on these values. Number 1, we envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. Do we walk that talk? We see a spiritual community in which each and every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principles. Is that a value that you share? Every single person living in alignment with your highest spiritual principle. We see a spiritual community in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. Do you hold each other accountable for that value? We envision this spiritual community, Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, awaking to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. A spiritual community where each and every person discovers his or her own personal power and ability to create individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. We envision a spiritual community in which we live and grow as one spiritual community that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life. A spiritual community where this kinship with all life prospers and connects through the guidance of spiritual wisdom and experience. Do the actions of Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, are they in alignment with those values? We envision a spiritual community where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors, providing sustainable structures to further the emerging global consciousness. Is that a value that you share? Perhaps not. If it is, are you walking your talk? We envision a spiritual community where each and every person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging. A spiritual community of peace and harmony, enfranchisement, and justice. Can you imagine a Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont that is consistently and constantly living from that value? We envision a spiritual community, a Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, in which resources are valued, cared for, and grown, and where there is generous and continuously sharing of these resources. Do we walk that talk? We envision a culture in our spiritual community in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or debts, is the norm. Do we forgive each other as a spiritual community? We envision a spiritual community which has renewed its emphasis on beauty, nature, and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. And lastly, we envision a spiritual community, a Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont, that works for everyone and for all of creation. Are you, as CSL Beaumont, living these values with each other consistently? Do you hold each other accountable for living into these values? Are you walking your talk? And lastly, are you taking actions that are in alignment with these values? So as I said earlier, Brene Brown recommends that you only choose 2 or 3 of these values to focus on. And the global heart vision is obviously a lot bigger than that. But the global heart vision is a good place to start to become clear on your values as a spiritual community. And as you become clear on the values that you hold sacred, as you walk the talk and make decisions from these values, then you will be sharing the dream of oneness and a world that works for all. And so it is. Thank you. And now I invite you just to go within, joining me in the consciousness of oneness. Just being in the presence of each other. Knowing that between us, filling the space between us and all around us, whether here in person or online, all that space between us is filled with love, filled with good, filled with God. For truly, God is all that there is. It is that wisdom, that peace, that harmony, that grace, that perfect intelligence which knows everything because it is everything. It is that spirit, that divine energy that we sometimes call God, that is at the center and the circumference of everything in the universe. It is that energy that is constantly circulating in and through and as our bodies, as our minds, as everything that we see and everything that we don't see. It is all that perfect divine energy. And what I know is true is that I am one, that I am an expression of that one. I know the same is true for you and for every single person within the sound of my voice and for all of creation. And so I speak my word this morning for each person here, knowing that wherever there is a sense of separation, whether that be a sense of separation from wholeness or abundant source, or a sense of separation from love and belonging, I know that that sense of separation now evaporates back into the nothingness from which it came. Because that is not the truth of me, it is not the truth of you, it is not the truth of this Center for Spiritual Living Beaumont. I know that as this community steps into that divine idea, that perfect idea that is back of everything, that whatever is needed is present, that whatever decisions that need to be made are made with divine wisdom and divine intelligence, that whatever energy or resources are needed, they show up with ease and grace. I know that as this spiritual community identifies those values which it holds dear, it steps into the greatness. It steps into that divine and perfect idea that is already present in the mind of God. And from that mind of God, from that limitless source, comes the perfect community spiritual leader that is all in, that shares the values of this spiritual community, that is taking this teaching, this knowing out into the world. I simply know this to be true right here and right now. And then with great gratitude, I release my word into the law, knowing that that soil acts intelligently upon everything that is placed into it. I know it is reflecting back to me and back to this community everything, all the intentions and all of the wisdom and all the love that has been poured into it gets reflected back and multiplied in ways that we don't even know. And so because I know that the universe is a place of love, I know that I am heard. And so I call it good, and I call it complete, and so it is. As we conclude our gathering this morning, I just invite you to place your hand over your heart and say with me, there is this thing called love. Love is in my mind. Love is in my body. Love is in everything I do. I accept it. I know it. And I give it away. And so it is. Thank you for joining me this morning, and I hope that I see you again next week.
Thank you for joining us for our Sunday service. Please remember to like, comment, and share this video on Facebook, YouTube, and any other social media you are a member of. To donate to CSL Beaumont, you can text GIVE to 951-420-6909, or you can visit our website at cslbeaumont.org and click the donate button at the top or bottom of the page. You can also mail your donation to CSL Beaumont, 802 Maple Avenue, Beaumont, California, 92223. Have a blessed day.